Hello, and welcome to the Boston Globe Sustainability Week. Before we begin, we'd like to take a moment to thank our underwriters for their support. Philips, our presenting sponsor, as well as the International Business School at Brandeis University and the Museum of Science. On behalf of all of us, we hope you enjoy the program.
Good morning and happy Earth Day. It's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Brandeis to this panel where we're going to talk about how to hopefully improve the way we take care of our Earth. My name is Ben Gomez-Cáceres. I'm a professor at Brandeis University, and I'll be your host and moderator today. We have a terrific panel, and we hope that you will find it interesting and useful as we go along. The Brandeis Business School is delighted to sponsor this panel. We hope you'll learn from it. And thank you also to the Boston Globe for giving us this opportunity. A few housekeeping rules. We are in a Zoom webinar mode, so we don't see the attendees, but we know you're here and we appreciate you're here. And you can communicate with us through the Q&A function at the bottom. The chat itself has been disabled. At least it's a one-way chat. You can sometimes get messages from us, but you cannot communicate with us. But if you have any questions along the way, please do so in the Q&A, and we will get to those questions by the end of the hour. If we don't get to all of them and you really want to know the answer to something that cropped up during the session, please write to us. We look forward to further conversation after this session is over. Beyond that, I should say that we are recording this. The recording will be available to attendees afterwards. We're stopped at 11 o'clock Eastern time, so we'll be here for an hour, and I look forward to engaging with our panelists. In a moment, I will introduce the panelists, but first let me say something about Brandeis and about the problem that we are addressing here. So for that, I'm going to share my screen for a moment and just walk you through a few ideas here. Hold on for a moment. Thank you. Okay. I assume that you see my screen now. This is a picture of Brandeis University. If you don't know of us, we are a medium-sized private university outside of Boston in the historic city of Waltham. We have terrific programs and research and teaching in liberal arts, sciences, social policy, and in business. And myself, I'm in the business school, and two of our panelists are also related to the business school. You'll hear in a minute. And at the business school, we want our students to understand climate change and the climate challenge as part of what they are doing in their studies of business, finance, and economics. So we have a business of climate change series of events every year. This is our third annual that we're doing this, and the panel today is part of our series of events that we've had already last week and the week before. And they all are around the topics that the students are studying so that they know that in their career, whatever their career path is, climate change is something they will have to deal with, and hopefully will be able to have positive action to mitigate and to improve how we take care of the world. So that's where we stand now in terms of where we're going. And I wanted to say something from our last year's Business of Climate Change. We issued a report, which may be of interest to many of us in this region. It is basically the ecosystem of startups in the climate tech field. This gives you just one chart from that report that shows where these 500 startups are located. In the report, there's a lot more detail about what they do and who runs them, and interesting facts that are helpful as we think about innovation in the Northeast region. And it turns out that innovation is a very important feature of what we face now. And the IPCC report, which I have been burning trees down to read pieces of, this is maybe 1/10 of it, is very interesting in regards to climate innovation, because it says, as you can see on the slide that's shown here, that for some important technologies, like solar technology, the prices and the costs have been coming down very fast over the last 10 years and 20 years, to the point where solar is now competitive with fossil fuel in terms of energy generation. That's a very important milestone, and it gives us a lot of hope that this technology can be introduced to take care of the problems we see. At the same time, the spread of the solar technology is fast, and also in batteries, you see the same thing, a declining cost and a spread of the use. At the same time, both solar and wind and batteries and all these technologies are still a very small share of the relative market size that they're in. And so that gives us a pause that even though we know what to do, we have the technology, that we need to do a lot to get there. And that's what this panel is about. It's about how do we get from here to there, given the barriers and the enablers that we see in the environment and that are also treated in the IPCC report. So let me give you this very, very complex chart just as a quick picture, Rorschach test in a way, to show you how the IPCC thinks that we ought to change our climate system, or sorry, our energy system over the next basically 25 years, if not quicker. And what you see here is that in 2019, the energy system globally was drawing, as we know, on fossil fuels, coal, gas, and oil. And then it was being used on the right-hand side by industry, by buildings, and by transport, et cetera. And one of the scenarios that they described that would avert the climate disaster would be the bottom one here, that by 2045, only 25 years from now, we have switched from the fossil fuels to renewables, to solar and wind is the model they're showing here. And on the industry and buildings and transport side, on the use side, there will be also radical changes in the way these functions are executed and how they are using electricity decarbonized way. And in the middle, there are power plants that have to change. So this is just one picture, and it's an illustration. And I would like you to keep in your mind, what do you think the world might look like or should look like 25 years from now, 20 years from now, 15 years from now? And then what does it take for us to get from here to there? And it's not trivial. The IPCC report says that there are a lot of barriers, that there are some enablers, but that in fact, our institutional frameworks are not necessarily up to the speed yet that our technology is. And so we know the geophysics, we know a lot of the technology, we're beginning to know a lot of the economics, and we still have to, in a way, transform our institutions to address this challenge. Otherwise, we won't get from here to there. And so I am delighted to have this panel. It's a terrific panel from several important sectors of the economy to throw light on this question of how do we get from here to there. We will have person from policy, Joe Curtatone, from economics, Linda Bowie, from business, and also from earlier in activist role, Adam Werbach, and Yoram Zuckerman from Goldman Sachs, who will address the finance side. So now I would like to just invite the panelists to all join us on stage, and I'll give a little introduction about each one of them so you know who they are, and then we will pose our tough question to them. And I will stop the screen share now. All right. So welcome, panelists. It's great to have you here. Let me give you a brief introduction. You all have impressive bios that are on the web and of course can be found by anybody. Let me start with our elected official first, not quite elected now, but Mr. Mayor Joe Curtatone was the mayor of Somerville, Massachusetts, one of our great cities around Boston, for 18 years, nine terms in a row. And as mayor of Somerville, Somerville has received recognition for its climate actions, for its climate plan. And so he has been on the forefront of policy at the local level and at the state level. He is now president of the Northeast Clean Energy Council, which is a group that helps business and government work together and find solutions for our region. Which includes the New England and also New York and other states. So thank you, Joe, for joining us.
Thank you.
We have next Adam Werbach. Adam, welcome. Adam is currently the global lead for sustainable shopping at Amazon. He was in the 1990s a student activist working to pass the California Desert Protection Act. So he earned his spurs very early on. He was the youngest at 23, became president of the Sierra Club. and served on the board of Greenpeace International. And then he went on to help companies to make this transition. He himself started companies that consulted with large companies that are trying to become more sustainable. And then he was chief sustainability officer for Saatchi & Saatchi. And that's before coming to Amazon, where he is now. And he published a wonderful book, which was probably before its time, a strategy for sustainability that gives prescriptions to business on how to make this transition. So Adam, welcome to our panel. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Next, Yoram Zuckerman. Yoram Zuckerman is Managing Director in Commodity Sales at Goldman Sachs, responsible for power and physical gas sales. He joined Goldman Sachs in 2009 as a vice president and rejoined in 2015 as a managing director. And Yoram is a close friend of Brandeis. He graduated here with his BA and then went on to study the Master in International Economics and Finance, which is one of our flagship course degrees in the business school. And so Yoram, welcome back to Brandeis. Welcome back to my classroom. It's a joy to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yoram. And Linda Bowie, last but not least, my colleague and associate dean at the business school, who is an economist who has been working on environmental issues before it was fashionable to do so. That is her specialty, and she publishes on economics of environment, and we'll hear from her in a minute. She served also on the EPA Science Advisory Board Council. So Linda, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
And myself, just a little background. I'm a professor of business and society at the business school. I direct the Asper Center for Global Entrepreneurship, which is also the center that has been taking the initiative on the business of climate change program that I described before. My own research, I work on strategic partnerships and ecosystems. And in my spare time, I'm an amateur astronomer who loves earth sciences. So I look forward to learning from this debate and seeing how we can, as I say, take care of our Earth in a better way. Good. Are we ready to go? All right. We have so many questions. There have been some questions submitted by attendees in advance. We will respect those and incorporate those as we can during the talk. But I would like to start with maybe each one of you just saying something from your point of view in this area. And let me start with Linda. So Professor Bowie, Linda Bowie, can I ask you from the economic theory point of view? I mean, economic theory tells us everything, supply and demand, it balances, invisible hand, things take care of themselves. And somehow this climate change is a wicked problem. It's one of those problems that is so complex and interchanged that it doesn't seem to respond to those easy economic solutions. I don't know why is it such a wicked problem from the economics point of view? What can we think about in that sense?
Well, from the viewpoint of economic theory, climate change poses problems for society because it leads to what we've referred to as market failure. Markets can't lead us to an efficient outcome, and we're going to get inefficient resource allocation. Now, this is going to happen for two reasons. The first is because there's a divergence between private costs and social costs. Now, what do I mean by this? When we make decisions, for example, when we decide to go on a road trip or we decide that we want to eat a burger at Shake Shack, what costs influence our decisions? Well, for the most part, the costs that we consider are the price we pay for the burger or the price we pay at the gas pump. And those are what we think of as our private costs the economic agents face. But there's a problem if those prices don't actually capture the true costs of those goods. Okay. So in particular, when we buy that burger or consume that gallon of gasoline, the price we pay doesn't capture the cost imposed on the environment from the consumption of those goods. So when market prices don't accurately capture the full social costs of the goods we consume, we end up with what economists refer to as an externality. And when that externality is negative, that is, the social cost is actually higher than the private cost, the market solution leads to what we have as too much of that good being consumed. Now, when we think about climate change, the problem is even made more difficult because climate change and global warming is what we call a public bad. That is, environmental costs that we impose through our individual actions don't affect just us individually, they affect everybody. So when we take individual actions, we fail to consider how our actions affect everybody else. And economic efficiency relies on people, firms, governments, all economic agents to account fully for their and accurately for their costs and their benefits. And when those actions involve negative externalities and public bads, the way that climate change does, costs and benefits don't get accurately reflected, and we get suboptimal choices being made. Now, on the bright side of all of this is that the problems themselves tell us what the solutions are. We can solve the market failures by having decisions that are based on true social costs and true social benefits. And those costs and benefits have to consider everybody who is affected. And so there is a solution out there. So that's how we think about it. Implementing the solution is obviously very difficult. And that's where businesses, individuals, governments really can come in and help us.
Thank you, Linda. That's so clear, the question of the external effects that are not measured by our private decisions, and somehow we have to find a way to bring them into our private decisions. And the solution sounds, in theory, easy, but it's not, because now we have to deal with actual institutions that have to somehow match the externality with the private prices. And let's discuss this further. And maybe if I can ask Joe to build on this, because Joe, in terms of policy, economists often look to government as say, okay, well, this is a public good problem. Government has to do something that will help us all see that, and then we respond to it appropriately. You've been actually doing this kind of stuff in government, and you know the difficulties and the achievements that you've had. What has been effective? What do you find kind of is workable in your experience at the local level and the state level, perhaps, for government to deal with some of these wicked problems?
Well, thanks, Ben. And first, thank you to you and Brandeis and the Boston Globe Museum of Science and everyone who's tuned in today or be watching this, and the panelists. Such a great panel. My answer will speak more to the approach and what's been effective and what is missing now. And I want to build on what Linda just ended with about that investment can be difficult. If we're going to, and there's been in this moment in time, it's difficult to point out to anything as opportunistic before us, such an opportunity to forge a new economy with such a wide and long runway. There's an inextricable link. The facts point to it of climate action with economic opportunity and business development. But to do that, to the call of the question now, policy must align to make the choice of investment, to drive the market as an easy choice of financing, and for the end user of our consumers. Their energy choice, their transportation must be easy, affordable, accessible, sustainable, and equitable. When we do that, as policymakers, we see where our impacts actually play a critical role to driving the markets to where we want to go. To do nothing, we know how business operates, and it's common. It defaults to what is easy and predictable and clear. Where we can be most effective is to align our policies, not just at the national, where a lot of the work has taken place, or at the state and subnational, but at the city and city regional level. And I say this because I spent 26 years in local government, 18 years there. And I've always been a regionalist, and Somerville has been a standard bearer in understanding the intersectionality of all our work on policy, on transportation and public health, sustainability, housing, racial and social justice, how it connects with one another. And climate action and climate crisis intersects with everything in our lives. But where we have a major gap in the work on climate action globally, and at COP26, this was loud and clear, is there's a dearth of connectivity between cities and city regions and the rest of the work. So if we pass climate bills, that's great. If we're investing in projects like wind and solar, that's very good. We know that's going to help, but we are not ready on a massive scale to implement because our policies are not connected, aligned at the local level. And where we can be very effective, and I'm sure there'll be some fault on the local level, is to build the capacity for cities and city regions to plan. And everywhere is different. In Massachusetts, we get a lot of really good lauding that it's so culturally nice that we have these parochial natures of our own individual cities and towns. But that's very difficult when you want to build a regional housing strategy, transportation plan, sustainability strategy. We can't attack a pandemic with 351 different strategies. So we need to build that capacity in smaller and medium-sized communities and take a very holistic regional approach to set the marketplace and connect innovation and research to investment in finance and public policy that impacts people, place, and planet. I think that's what's going to have the biggest impact, and not just focus on one type of project and one sector of say, renewables, and not the more holistic approach.
Awesome. Yes. So it's an all hands on deck kind of approach, right? You say government has to be there, business, et cetera. And yeah, the cooperation between units of government or local governments is key, because this is, as Linda described to us, a global externality. This is not an externality that's located in a particular town or city. So Joe, thank you for it. It sounds like a tough task of getting all these government entities to reform and to move in the right direction, but it's doable. I hear it from what you did in Somerville, right?
Well, yeah. What do we say? It's complex, not complicated. We need to simplify the complexity of the ecosystem.
Excellent. Simplify the complexity of the ecosystem. That's a good watchword. Thank you, Joe. Let me move to another aspect of what kind of drives change, which is finance. So again, the economic problem, the political or policy solution and framework, and then the financial world is an important infrastructure, in a way, is the social infrastructure of how we operate. And Yoram is in the middle of that, in the sense of being in an energy trading function, and also been thinking about this for many years, and I know passionate also about climate change. So Yoram, can you help us understand what is the financial actors' response and role in this problem that Linda first posed to us and that we're trying to approach from all angles?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be back. Look, we at Goldman work with corporates who are trying in many ways to participate in this market, whether that is, net zero 2050 goals, developing renewable assets, participating in voluntary carbon markets or compliance carbon markets. And what struck me, especially as I was listening to Joe and Linda, is right, when we talk about negative externalities, that is doing business as usual and figuring out how to change your business in a way that gets rid of these negative externalities is a very complicated question and generally not a core competency of the people we talk to. Right? It is not if you are a real estate construction business or an airline, right? Figuring out how to invent a clean fuel that works or a steel that is more efficient is not something that you can do. So that's a major challenge. We have worked over the last few years with renewable developers to help them through Goldman giving them contracts to develop wind and solar assets in the United States. And the one thing that I'll note is a lot of this has been driven by the consumer and been driven by corporates who feel this responsibility to push this topic further. I think partially because I think it is a global and very complex problem, and so young consumers in particular, and I'm not going to steal Amazon's thunder here, but the tech companies were obviously the leaders in kind of saying, well, if nothing is coming from the government, we will start this by putting our money to work. And it's good to be a big company, but there's obviously a lot of companies who need to do that. So I can tell you that the one thing that I've noted that has worked, when you think about scope 2 emissions, which are electric demand in the United States in particular, or globally, but I'm focused on the United States, is there's a tax credit program that facilitates the construction of renewable assets, right? Wind and solar, the ITC and the PTC. And having that has led to significant build of renewable assets. And that build has led to the lowering of the cost, right? As demand has picked up and people have learned how to build these things more efficiently to make them competitive with natural gas fired generation, let's say. And so, I do think the challenges are plentiful. I think capital in the end, right? Most corporates have especially if they're publicly traded, have a fiduciary responsibility to generate returns, not to invest them in businesses that have nothing directly to do with what they do. And so the challenge will be like, how do you generate a positive return, or at least a non-negative return, right? How do you move the development of new technologies forward? So like, is there some kind of incentive that helps, right? Whether it's a government incentive or some other that helps the development of technologies? I'm thinking, like, if you think about hydrogen, for example, right? These facilities are billion-dollar facilities. So this is not, these are big dollars that need to be invested. And then the other thing where we've seen a significant change in the competitive landscape on the financing side is, I'm sure all of you have seen that banks have announced that they're reducing their exposure to fossil fuel companies and coal and coal mining and the like. And so there will be a cost of capital benefit that is swinging towards renewables and clean tech that will help. But the dollar amounts we're talking about are huge, right? So I read somewhere that for us to, assuming you can reach net zero by 2050, let's say technologically, you probably need investments of $1 to $2 trillion a year just for renewable energy, and $1 to $2 trillion a year. Maybe to provide some scope, the entire infrastructure bill that was just passed was $1.2 billion, and that was not per year, but just total. So it's going to be, I think it's a complicated path because the dollars are huge, and the returns may not be immediate.
Yeah, Yoram, so I hear you say in a way that the financial flows, as you say, they have to be substantial. The IPCC says at least 6 times the investment rate that we've had so far in these things is what we need. And a lot of it to developing countries, that's where the growth of energy will take place. So there'll be transfers that need to take place there for them to invest in the proper technology. But I hear you say, Yoram, that in a way the financial markets are responsive to government incentives and policies, as well as to investors and consumer actions and interests. Is that how we should think about the financial markets, as a responsive actor in a way?
Sure. I mean, if the returns are right? I mean,
if the returns are right,
you're right. I mean, you have for financial markets, right, or for non-government type of investment, but private investment or corporate investment, right? You have to generate a return, right? Whether that is, you have to borrow money to make these investments, right? And those bear interest, and so I think the thing that we have seen in the renewable space, right, is that the equity returns that renewable investors are looking for are, call it in the high single digits, as opposed to maybe in the low double digits for other investments. But I mean, they're still positive, right? And you need to make positive returns. And so the response will be there. What I think would be very helpful for my clients is if they had some kind of clarity around how to measure things, what type of standards to use, right? So that is, I think, where a lot of this discussion is shifting now, because even if your heart's in the right place, figuring out how to deploy capital, right, has to be done in a way that is at least responsible to your shareholders. And so having clarity of rules and clarity of measurement and would be helpful.
Thank you, Rob. You're really a wicked problem. So Adam, we talked a bit about how investors and consumers might have, in a way, lead companies in this, and you've been in a way on both sides of this as an activist, student activist, and trying to get companies to see the light, and then also working inside and for companies and helping them create the structures that would make them more sustainable. Can you comment on what is it that business is doing to respond to the challenge?
Well, thank you, Ben. I mean, let's speak plainly here, because it's Earth Day and the state of the Earth is in crisis. And we're here today because this is an accelerating crisis that all of us have recognized. And yes, citizens across the world are standing up and saying something has to be done. Companies are joining them, governments are joining them, finance is joining them, the whole field of economics is joining, but we can't forget that we are in this middle of this crisis. I live in California, I live in San Francisco, and we had some rain last night, and all of us were like, oh God, I hope this pushes off the fire season a little bit further. It's just right to our head. And when you have to think about every time it rains, is it going to stop disaster from hitting our homes? You're in crisis. I read recently that the Great Barrier Reef, which is I think the world's largest living organism or living structure, has had yet another bleaching event, which I think is the fourth in the last 6 years. And of course, we're in the middle of a war in Ukraine, and nothing could be worse for the environment than Mariupol being bombed to smithereens by Russia. Just proving and asking the question, can we work together as humanity to deal with these wicked problems, these strong challenges that are coming to us? So in that context, yeah, we need business, we need government, we need citizens to all stand up and do something. And I can speak to some of the business side and the citizen side from the perspective of Amazon. But I think it really has to start with companies following their customers and making a pledge, like just saying, yeah, we're going to say what you're all seeing, that there is a problem here and we're going to act on it. And for Amazon, that meant the climate pledge, which is a commitment to get to the Paris Agreement 10 years ahead by 2040, and then to recruit 300 other companies to join that pledge, so that there's lots of businesses talking together in a singular voice saying, yes, this is a crisis and we're working on it, we're planning for it. We want our suppliers to know this is happening. We want our customers and our employees to know this is happening. We're going to go towards it. And a pledge, of course, I think people are pretty skeptical of pledges because they're easy to make. So then the next step is action. What type of action are you seeing? In terms of Amazon, that's putting its money out. It's as we spoke about earlier, but like Amazon invested in committed to 100,000 Rivian electric trucks. It set up a $3 billion climate pledge fund to invest in the types of businesses we need to actually have the technology to reach that pledge. It invested in, I think, $100 million in the Right Now Climate Fund and the Leaf Coalition to actually create the type of long-term carbon offsets that are actually really pull carbon out long-term. It's become the world's largest investor in corporate investor in clean energy. So all those are things, but in the end, they're just responsibility, right? This is what Amazon has to do to be a business that will thrive in the coming century, decade, next years. Probably more close to my heart is also the customer action that is being called upon. Amazon's a customer-obsessed company, and customers are demanding this. So the question is, like, how does a company like Amazon meet its customers? And I think the first thing it can do is really send a market signal that customers want these products. They want their products to not have a deleterious effect on the environment, and not to take more carbon than they should. And everything will have an impact, but how can it do that? And to do that, what we've worked on is a project we call Climate Pledge Friendly, which is basically to identify more sustainable products on Amazon. Now we've identified 300,000 products that have one of 38 different external certifications, things like Fair Trade International or USDA Organic or carbon neutrality, to identify what products actually are more sustainable. And again, we're really trying to send a market signal that we want more of these products on our marketplace. We want to be able to show our customers there are options and to encourage them to do that. And our role is to say, we're going to help push the market to create these products, to send a signal that we will make it easier for sellers to sell these products, make it easier for customers to buy them, make it convenient, make them price competitive, and push the market to make more sustainable products. Because it really is this cycle we call flywheel, where the more we can translate customer demand and show that to sellers, they're going to make more of those products. If they make more of those products, it'll lower the price of those products, which will increase customer demand. And that's what we're out to do, is to really figure out how do we actually create that flywheel and speed it up so we can more quickly take that customer demand and turn it into actual change or actual affect some of the problems that we're all experiencing right now.
Awesome. That flywheel is what we want to get going, right? I mean, we want the flywheel, the proper flywheel to get going in through all our sectors that makes it good business to mitigate climate change. And I suppose that's where the returns would come from, and that's where success would come from. So Adam, from the companies you've worked with, Amazon and others, is it a challenge? Is it an opportunity? We hear talk about, oh, this is a great opportunity for employment, for growth, and then on the other hand, what needs to be done by these companies is transformational and disruptive. So how do you balance that? Is this a challenge or an opportunity for companies?
It's a crisis and it's a reality. And I think probably all of us have spent time convincing companies, arguing that this is important. And I'm not sure if you're experiencing this, Ben, right now, but I spend almost no time convincing anymore. Like, everyone understands this is important. Everyone understands it's happening. Everyone understands regulation is coming. Anyone who works in Europe sees the regulations spinning down really, really fast. So this is happening. Like, this is reality. So the really question is the how. Can we invent the mechanisms, the tools to be able to turn this moment, this fact that fuels are becoming more expensive and we need to switch them out so that they're lower carbon, this fact that customers are asking for different types of products and services, this fact that we can't work the same way we are. Like, how can we turn that? How do we actually create the mechanisms to do that so that they actually fit within the framework of business? I think we all believe that business can serve here, but we're really lacking the ways to do it. This sort of formerly take, make, waste economy, where it was just really easy to take cheap energy and turn it into things and sell them to people endlessly, that's over. Right? It's ending or over. So I think right now, it's like, I think we've accepted the fact that it's reality, it's a crisis and opportunity, and let's just get to the business of doing it.
Get to the business of doing it. And Joe, let me come to you on this, because there was actually an interesting question from one of the attendees in advance, which was how do governments, local governments, work with companies, let's say in their city and areas, to get this transformation going that Adam said really is in their interest and in everybody's interest, but it takes signals, and it takes probably some help from government to actually get it done.
Right now, it's an important question, because I will tell you, having served in local government 26 years, 18 as mayor, we tried to lead, we signed on to Paris agreements and Race to Zero and C40, and I'd be in a room and meeting with other officials and say, now what? How do we implement? How do we do this? What should our local zoning code and building code look like? How do we, in the case of Somerville, here's an example of how we can help. With Greentown Labs, we brought them to Somerville a decade ago, and they're the largest climate tech incubator in North America. More importantly, we heard from companies who wanted, emerging companies, startups, who wanted to show proof and demonstrate proof of concept. How did they do that? So they were, again, this is where smaller other communities without organizational capacity need assistance, where states and other agencies come in, develop procurement measures whereby we would demonstrate, weather monitoring stations, solar powered phone charging stations and the like, but we had to do that as a request for interest aligned with a public purpose, which was our climate goals. But the other point is, this is where industry, on whether you're on the climate and clean tech side, or others seeking to lead on ESG, have the opportunity to engage with local policymakers to help them develop the context, expertise, and invest in that to, again, implement regulations and policies that make that frontline investment in financing the easy, predictable choice and drive the markets where they should be going. And look, the markets are heading that way. I think in the last year and a half alone, there was a 3,250% increase in VC funding of climate tech beyond clean tech. Even in the last several months, we've seen institutional finance increase by more than 50%. But are we set up for success? We're not there yet. And this is solvable. But we need to make sure that if we don't do this, the consequence will be this. Local municipalities will just react and do things on a project or narrow policy standpoint. Maybe we'll outlaw any new gas hookups or do such, and that's not done in the context of everything. And that's done without having an understanding of how investment works and how we can drive it more rapidly to meet our sustainability goals.
Mhm. So Joe, that's the first part of the flywheel is the innovation and the startups and the venture capital and all that. At the same time, existing large companies have to make transformational change, whether it's industry or buildings or transportation, the companies that are there. And Yoram, I'll look to you for a moment on this. One of the issues that comes up is that some of the assets in place are going to be what they call stranded, that are not going to be useful if we stop burning fossil fuels, and that's the idea. So how do we think about that from a finance point of view, that some companies have to stop doing what they're doing, and some will be doing new things, so that's the opportunity part, but some will stop doing what they're doing, and they are getting pressure, even as you said, from investors through ESG investing or sector-wise preferences. But how do you think about this, the established incumbents in a way, and what their reaction will be to this change?
Well, look, I think it's the crux of the problem, right? Because I do think that they don't have to do anything right now, right? By law, most of them do it because they think it's the right thing to do when their investors are maybe pushing them to do it. But the reality is, and I think Adam brought this up, right, with the Ukraine war, is those priorities can shift very quickly when you need to focus on something else, right? So in a almost 0% interest rate environment, when things are going swimmingly, you can focus on essential items that may be good and may end up giving you a Super Bowl ad, with your respective logo running in front of a wind turbine or something like that. But the challenge is, I think, one, look, incumbents are never easy to move, right? And so, but it's also, they're not required to move. And it is not easy to move, right? So if the airline industry has instituted and worked around a standard called CORSIA, which is meant to give some guidance as to what airlines are supposed to do, and the implementation there has been very difficult because they decided this before 2020, and then COVID happened, and airlines had to focus on something else. So I think that's part of the challenge. I do think, right, when you ask me the question, I always think of like steam engines and kind of the transition away from those things. Is time will make the transition happen, right? And people who don't adapt will over time start to kind of wither away. So my sense has been, right, if you look at the oil majors, they've all made some commitment because they realize, on the one hand, right, we're generating a lot of cash right now. We're going to take some of this cash that we're generating and reinvest it into new businesses that are greener, and it is an understanding, right, that there is change coming. The timing of it can be very it's very ill-defined. But if you think about I'm very encouraged by the oil majors, right? Because on the other hand, those are also companies that, for example, understand long-term infrastructure investments with a lot of capital cost that comes up front, right? So if you think about, again, hydrogen, there's probably no kind of set of corporations that have a better setup to make that happen than an oil major, right? Who's used to that and has that infrastructure set up. So I think, time will change companies, but the speed of change will be determined by kind of the policy that comes with it. So right now there is no obligation other than a moral obligation, and so it's going to take time.
Yeah, well, time. I mean, Linda, we talk often in economics that we know what something will happen, but we don't know when. Right. So the question of time, the vision is there, but that doesn't mean it's a short distance, right? Especially when you have to transform, as we talked already, incumbents and businesses are doing business as usual, and governments, by the way, are also doing government as usual, and politics is not the easiest thing to get going quickly. So Linda, how are we doing on incorporating those externalities into the model you presented us, and can we get change on a timely basis? I guess that's really the question here.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it requires political will, which, Joe would know more than anybody else, having had boots on the ground, to get the action that we need. And, time is of the essence. I think it's really, really important that companies like Amazon and other large companies are trying to be responsible and trying to start thinking about how they can do better and how they can get their customers to do better. But without government stepping in and developing policy to get us moving in the right direction faster, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, I know that Joe and Somerville really did a lot of stuff. There are other places in the world that are trying to move us along. You think about British Columbia and Canada. BC was the first place in Canada to institute a carbon tax, and it was a significant carbon tax. Where when it started, it was something like $10 per ton of carbon equivalent in 2008, and they're at about 50. They're going to be up to $50 per ton of carbon equivalent in 2022. Now, nobody likes taxes. Right? No question about it. Nobody enjoys paying taxes. But again, from a theoretical point of view, there are ways in which you can take those tax revenues and redistribute them. And at least in the first I don't know, dozen years or so with the BC carbon tax, it was a revenue neutral tax. So the provincial government took taxes in and they redistributed it. Now, it's no longer revenue neutral, but there are ways that governments can come in and start policies that are faster and get us moving along where time is of the essence. Now, that is not to say that BC has not come under an enormous amount of criticism about not getting this carbon tax right. But we could say the same about a lot of our policies. Science is evolving and trying to figure out what the right carbon tax would be and what the right level of carbon emissions or carbon equivalent emissions are that we can sustain while continuing growth. Those are all questions that we're still struggling with, but we're moving. We can move in the right direction with enough political will, but I don't know where we find that. Certainly in today's political environment,
especially in an increasingly inflationary environment.
Absolutely.
So the other economic goals, inflation, inequality, justice, in a way, sometimes conflict, or if the instruments aren't designed in a way that they don't conflict, they end up conflicting, and the carbon tax can be very regressive and hit the most disadvantaged in society strongly. And so one has to do something to make that work. Joe, can you speak to this issue about can we get a political will here to work? I mean, can we get agreement, and then how do you balance these other inequalities and justice issues that sometimes are perceived to be in conflict with climate? They don't need to be, but
I submit I think the people of the world, of our country, overwhelming people we're all in the right value perspective and viewing it to the right lens. So on our political leaders, what we fail to do, and you touched upon this, I know people don't have empathy for bureaucrats like me or those in legislatures and they're, in addition to this critical work before us, they're fighting for basic things for their constituents every day, right? And I've had this conversation, and we work with governors across the region and at the national level and other policymakers. We have to give them the context. What's at stake? We have failed societally on the narrative of climate action and what we can do and what's at stake, not just, but also on the industry and investment side. This is where that engagement, what is possible, really outlines what's at stake. You're not disturbing me. Come on, guys, I'll get out of here. 2 minutes. So I'm sorry about that. And if we dared to do that, we will move the dial. This is the classic adaptive challenge of our lives, right here. How do we align allies and stakeholders to move on a value narrative perspective to where we need to go? And I would say it'd be wrong to put it all in the bureaucratic halls of state houses and national congressional. It'd be wrong to put it only into investment and industry. Advocacy and activism will lead the way. And I've learned that from experience in my work, because I'll show you that. I think former President Barack Obama said it well when hundreds of thousands of people were protesting out in COP, and I was there. We need to channel that energy to move the dial and make the case, but we also don't have a narrative. We have to simplify on a very humanistic level, again, that aligns climate action with economic opportunity and business development. It's there. And that's how we move it.
More power to you. I hope that we get that movement. Adam, I would like to ask you about the sort of social awakening that you've been seeing. I mean, as I said, you were a student activist early on, and you see that, and you probably see that in your consumers. But before I go there, there's a couple of questions here having to do with the carbon tax. So if you don't mind, Adam, hold on that for a moment. And let's come back just quickly on the carbon tax, which Linda described, a couple of questions that have just been posted. Yoram, is that kind of carbon tax regime or something like that, the kind of signal that would help move finance?
Well, I think when I think about finance, and okay, speaking for a giant industry here, right?
Yeah.
What we like, right, is some clarity of rules, and then we'll figure out how to work around these rules, right? So if there's a carbon tax regime, then we will figure out how to build that into our models and how to think about it. I think clarity is more important than non-clarity, right? One thing that struck me as I've been listening to this is we've been talking about Adam as an activist, right? To really accomplish this, we have to get out of the realm of activism and into the realm where this is like the standard, right? And like this has to become so to me that it requires everyone here on this call and lots of other people, right, is you need rules and policies and standards that you can actually make capital decisions on, right? Whether you want to borrow money, invest money, or choose a path. Because until you have that, right, it's the finance industry. We're responsive to our customers who need capital to invest. So that capital needs to be invested. So somebody needs to be able to make a decision with confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. That's how that works. So, Adam, you've been cold called now a couple of times here. I think the question I would like to understand better, and maybe this is a projection, to some extent, the societal awakening at all levels, youth, consumers, investors, philosophers, artists, somehow it is all hands on deck. Like, you're probably not going to get the political movement unless you have a broad-based understanding that climate justice is something that we need to work on very quickly. But Adam, how maybe I'm reading too much into this movement, but what's your sense for the role of societal awareness and activism in the way that was just mentioned, or should this be business now become as usual but different usual?
I think there's no doubt that civil society has pushed business into making this change. Like I think that is inarguable. It's happened over a long period of time. In some ways, it started out as science. It led into civil movements. And now finally, countlessly business is catching up. And there's some places where government has led, but government again has been pushed by its citizenry. And we may be moving from the activist phase in some of these things and actually moving into like, let's get the rule setting and the capital moving and get it really clear and business as usual. We still need the disruption. We still need that push. And clearly, even if we look at all the plans we have today, they're not adequate. We are not there yet. We are heading in the right direction. We're going to hit master that curve. We can see how it bends, but we're not there We're not there yet in a number of different places, right? We don't yet have the capital investment in for the energy transition. We're not there on how we're going to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, which all of our models require. Like we're there, but we still need to go and move a lot faster on it. So the disruption, the activism needs to continue and accelerate, because this is not like, it's not baked in yet. 10 years ago, all of us were like the nerds in the corner, like, oh, you're working on that stuff, you're weird. Now it's having a moment and everyone's like, God, where are those nerds? We need them right now. But we need more nerds. Like, we need more people who are in this space, and we need to recruit them. We need the business schools to be pumping more out. Like, there's money to be made here, sure, but like, the world needs us. The world needs young people to come into this field and to lead us. That's what we need right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Adam, and thank you for speaking directly to the students in the audience. There are students in the audience who are excited about this and want to find a way to apply their talents in their new careers in the direction that we're talking about. So we're running out of time. I have to apologize for all the questions that have come in that we didn't get to, and I will tell them again. If you want to reply to me as with a question, we'll see if we can handle this after the event to you by email. But before we close, can we just go around and end this with I would say probably a hopeful note? What you found from our conversation and from your view of this, that could be something that on Earth Day we can now take with us and have hope. Maybe that's a tall order, but maybe we can start with the economics again. Linda, have you heard anything here that would help in the problems you addressed well for us in the beginning?
For me, I think what keeps me optimistic is that people understand now that there is a problem. We're not fighting that battle as much anymore. And if we can agree that there is a problem, we can work towards getting a solution. It would be really nice if we could work a little faster. But if we can't agree on the problem, we have nowhere to go. And I think it's really important that that everybody understands, and that businesses understand, consumers are starting to understand, governments are understanding. This is not an easy issue, but we can get where we need to go.
Thank you, Linda. Joe, we understand the problem. Now we want to look at solutions or something. Short comment on this, if you can.
Okay, well, we have, and there are so many emerging solutions. A lot of our ability to meet our goals will be the result of technologies. 50% of the technologies that are being developed right now today, to scale that up will be critical. But I take away, this level of constructive disequilibrium that is driving the conversation. It is only continues to percolate. And I do see it not just from, I use activism advocates broadly, and we should all be activists in this level. So from the investment side, the finance and policy, business, people of everyday life, I sense continued momentum, hopefully with greater velocity, to drive this new economy to invest in people, place, and planet.
Great, thank you. Yoram, you've been recruited to be an activist now. So can we add that to the Goldman Sachs portfolio?
I don't know if I'm the activist, but I think your students should be, right? Echoing Adam, I think this is a tremendous opportunity, right? Speaking as a finance person, for people who are thinking about careers, right? And this is a broad opportunity, right? So you don't have to be a nerd, like Adam said, necessarily, but there are things you can do. And I think this is this will dominate the conversation for the next 30 years at least, and will provide many ways of making a mark and making a good living.
Great, thank you. That'll go to lots of students' hearts, I'm sure, and minds. Adam, last word on something hopeful as we go into Earth Day and hopefully celebrate a beautiful day too.
Happening. I mean, this is the thing. There's no debate here in this conversation about whether we should be acting or what, like none, right? We're doing it, and the question is how. And that's remarkably optimistic. And the fact that you're pumping out students who want to work on this and who will be hired by all of us because we need them, that's great. I mean, this is what the world needs.
Perfect. Thank you. On that note, let me thank all of you. It's been wonderful. I think this is one of the things Brandeis does well, is to bring diverse perspectives to bear on important issues. And climate justice is one of those important issues that Brandeis is dedicated to, has dedicated itself to, and will continue to do so. So Joe, thank you. Adam, thank you. Linda, thank you. Yoram, thank you. And Boston Globe, again, thank you for this opportunity to work together. And we do hope this is the beginning of a conversation. I will welcome those who are new to the Brandeis audience, again, to contact me or contact others at Brandeis or Linda and engage further in this conversation. And to the students, I know we'll see you, and you've heard a lot here that hopefully will help you on your career track to really make a difference in the world. So thank you all, and have a beautiful, nice Earth Day, and hopefully the optimism we end with will rule. Thank you very much.
Happy Earth Day.
Thank you for your
Thanks.
attention.